The president expresses regrets, but accepts the resignation of the top man at the VA. American cities deal with violence. We'll show you how one in the heartland is coping. Pope Francis ordains a new bishop in St. Peter's Basilica. We take you to the moving ceremony. And we'll meet the new Spelling Bee co-champs tonight. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Friday, May 30th, 2014.
I apologize as the senior leader of the Department of Veterans Affairs. I extend that apology to the people whom I care most deeply about, and that's the veterans of this great country, to their families and loved ones whom I have been honored to serve for over 5 years now. It's a call of a lifetime.
Veterans Affairs Secretary Eric Shinseki resigning amid findings of a recent VA report on the treatment of veterans. Now the president is appointing new leadership for the VA. Thank you for joining us on this Friday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Looking at news now. President Obama accepted Secretary Shinseki's resignation at the White House this morning after Shinseki announced he's fired all senior officials at the troubled Phoenix VA Medical Center. Our Wyatt Goolsby has been covering this developing story throughout the day and joins us now from the White House. Wyatt?
Brian, the president says he accepted Shinseki's resignation after the secretary told him that the VA needs new leadership and that he did not want to be a distraction. President Obama made the announcement this morning saying that Shinseki had served with honor, but in the end, he agreed with the decision to leave. The president named the Deputy Secretary Sloan Gibson as head for the VA while he searches for a permanent one. Shinseki had been facing mounting pressure to step down from lawmakers in both parties after a report showed deep-seated problems at VA facilities across the country.
I regret that he has to resign under these circumstances, but I also have confidence in Sloan, and I share Rick Shinseki's assessment that the #1 priority is making sure that problems get fixed so that if there's a veteran out there who needs help, that they're getting a schedule and they're able to come in and see a doctor.
And until the president outlines a vision and an effective plan for addressing the broad dysfunction at the VA, today's announcement really changes nothing. One personnel change cannot be used as an excuse to paper over a systemic problem. Our veterans deserve better. We'll hold the president accountable until he makes things right.
In a speech earlier today to a veterans group, Shinseki announced a series of steps to fix the problems. That includes firing all senior officials at the Phoenix healthcare facility. Shinseki also told the president that he agrees with the reports that say some 1,700 veterans who were looking for care were kept off of official wait lists there in Phoenix. Brian?
All right, Wyatt Goolsby reporting from the White House this evening. Thank you, Wyatt. Joseph Violante, the National Legislative Director for the DAV, Disabled American Veterans, joining us now to talk about today's developments. Joe, this is a huge shakeup. Would you say it's overdone or overdue?
I say it's overdone. Secretary Shinseki has been a dedicated civil servant, a two-tour combat disabled veteran who has brought considerable change to the VA, much needed change for VA. And DAV did not call for his resignation. We believe that the VA under his leadership could be turned around. So it's regrettable that he's gone.
Yeah, he got caught up in politics a bit. Can the blame for the problems that the VA is facing be placed on one man's shoulder?
No, and it's an argument that we've been making, is that the fault for what happened does not lie at Shinseki, Secretary Shinseki's footsteps. I mean, there's a number of people that have a responsibility here. The administration for putting forth their budget recommendation, Congress for appropriating the proper level of funding, and even I feel guilty in not getting our grassroots more activated to put more pressure on Congress over the years to provide additional funding.
Give us a sense of the size of this department. Is it even possible to get control of these problems?
Well, the VA has about 1,700 points of contact out there, 300,000 employees, and it is a very large department, and it's difficult to run. DAV has many points of contact out there, also several tens of thousands of individuals who are involved in either providing free services to veterans coming in for their claims work or volunteering at hospitals or volunteering to drive veterans. So we have a lot of contact out there. Our people keep us informed of what's going on.
The DAV does great work. I'm very familiar with it. What do you think the new leadership could or should do to try to rebuild trust in the system?
Well, for one thing, Secretary Shinseki talked about the audit teams that are going out there. When we testified before the Senate last week, we asked that there be third-party or independent third-party experts that go out with those audit teams to ensure the American public and the veteran community that these audits are being done properly, that we're getting down to the heart of the problem, finding out what's going on.
Joe Violante from the DAV, thank you and all of our veterans who have served so that we can live free.
Well, thank you, Brian. Appreciate it.
Some of the other stories now our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. President Obama made a surprise appearance in the White House press briefing room this afternoon, announcing yet another resignation. White House Chief Spokesman Jay Carney will step down in June. The president called Carney one of his closest friends and advisors. He's been one of the most visible faces of the administration, answering media questions almost daily. Deputy Press Secretary Josh Earnest takes over that position. A Kansas City native, Earnest is the Chief of Staff in the White House Office of Communications. Pope Francis has elevated Undersecretary of the Synod of Bishops to the rank of bishop today. Monsignor Fabio Fabene was ordained a bishop in St. Peter's Basilica. Italian media reports that in his homily, the Holy Father said being a bishop is more of a service than an honor. The Synod is a group of bishops from all over the world who serve as advisors to the Pope. The Pontifical Yearbook is out with figures showing the Church is growing the most in Africa. The Italian website Vatican Insider suggests this could help explain the fresh outbreaks of violence against Christians and Catholics by Islamic extremists on the African continent. The rate at which the number of Africa's Catholics has risen is far higher than the population growth rate during that same period of time. A 76-year-old priest was among the 18 people killed in this week's attack on a Catholic church in the Central African Republic. Our Lady of Fatima Church had offered sanctuary to people trying to escape the violence in the region. The local archbishop says men armed with automatic weapons and grenades shouted in English, "Open the door," then proceeded to open fire. The parish priest and 17 others were killed outright. There are unconfirmed reports tonight that dozens of others were taken hostage and may have also been murdered. Well, it's been a violent year in some American cities. Chicago already has recorded 115 murders this year, Columbus 40, and Indianapolis with 60 murders is on track to have one of its deadliest years since 1998. Jason Calvi has been researching this alarming trend. Jason, what's being done to stop the violence on our city streets?
Well, Brian, let's take a look at one example, Indianapolis. There's more police on the streets, but that's not all. One Christian group is also taking to the streets with prayer and witness.
Scenes of horror in Indiana's capital. 2 men shot to death in their car. A 19-year-old arrested for murder next to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. What can be done to stop this violence?
We're not going to arrest our way out of this problem. This is a community-driven issue. There are social issues at play here.
Last year, 125 people were murdered here. The city moved 100 officers from behind their desks to the streets. But the homicide rate this year is climbing.
Baker 222 and 269.
Officer Daniel Brezik patrols one of Indy's most dangerous neighborhoods, known as the Swamp.
Majority of our suspects and or sometimes victims are actively engaged in narcotic sales, and that ends up, more times than not, it seems to be the motive behind their assault.
But across town, the armor of prayer and a different kind of patrol.
What we're trying to do is build relationships with troubled teens who are involved in gangs or neighborhood cliques and drug dealers.
Father God, we thank you for this day.
Reverend Charles Harrison founded the Indianapolis chapter of the 10-Point Coalition. They aim to stop street violence. Volunteers like Daryl Jones try to talk to teens about their choices.
We're people that's been out here in the streets doing the same things, or some of the same things that the kids are doing now. So therefore the kids listen to us a little bit.
but their point may not be getting across.
That's my family, so I don't ever think I'll be able to get out.
And to help people like him, the 10-Point Coalition gathers neighborhoods together for prayer. And I'm told some of the Catholic pastors in the inner city have joined the rallies. Now, Brian, this is just two approaches: more police on the streets and also these faith-based groups tonight trying to stop crime in our cities.
It sounds like a good collaboration coalition. Thank you. Jason Calvi. Hillary Clinton is defending her response to the 2012 terrorist attack in her new book, Hard Choices. It's set to be released June 10th, but her team is already sending out excerpts of the book. Clinton writes she will, quote, not be part of a political slugfest on the backs of dead Americans. The House voted earlier this month to create a select committee to conduct a new investigation of the attacks and its aftermath. Well, they have studied the dictionary, they've expanded their vocabulary, and now for the first time in 52 years, two spellers share the title of Scripps National Spelling Bee Champion.
Now, no more questions. Get the letters out there.
Okay, whatever.
However you say it, just spell it.
F-E-U-I-L-L-E-T-O-N.
Altercation or dispute delivered in alternating lines, as in classical Greek drama.
14-year-old Sriram Hathwar and 13-year-old Ansan Sujo plowed through a tense and riveting final round duel. After the two spelled a dozen words correctly in a row, they were both named champions. Each boy will take home their own trophy and more than $33,000 in cash and prizes. And on a different stage tonight, the one with the voice may be the one with the habit. 25-year-old sister Christina is now a finalist on Italy's The Voice, a singing competition show. Known as the Singing Nun, she's been showing the world that religious can really take to the microphone. Her voice coach says Sister Christina is one of the wonderful and wholesome things in his career. Coming up, preparing for the 70th anniversary of D-Day on the coast of France. And an 89-year-old Florida veteran who was there that June morning remembers the fight of his life. Thanks for watching the Friday edition of EWTN News Nightly for this 30th of May. I'm Brian Patrick. 1 week from today, we remember D-Day. It was 70 years ago that Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy, France. Thousands died on those beaches, but history has shown D-Day as the turning point in World War II Europe. On a moonless night, June 6, 1944, waves of troops crossed the English Channel by air and by sea from the UK to take on Nazi forces occupying much of France and most of northern Europe. After months of planning and waiting for the right conditions, General Dwight Eisenhower gave the green light to Project Overlord. The plan was to land 133,000 American, British, and Canadian troops on 5 Normandy beaches, codenamed Gold, Juno, Omaha, Sword, and Utah. Well, today, towns across northern France are putting the finishing touches on preparations for next Friday's ceremony marking that D-Day anniversary. Some 18 heads of state are expected to attend, including German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Russian President Vladimir Putin. U.S. President Barack Obama and French President Francois Hollande will host a joint ceremony near those Normandy beaches on which Allied troops launched their invasion. The D-Day landings brought the eventual liberation of Europe and the end of the Second World War.
It's the symbolism. This was the jump-off point. This was the start of the end of the war for Europe. And you know, people talk about, well, the Korea came out afterwards, you know, the Gulf Wars afterwards, you know, Vietnam as well, but it's not talked about like World War II is.
More than 9,000 American servicemen and women are buried at the U.S. cemetery on the cliff overlooking Omaha Beach. An 89-year-old Florida veteran was just a teenager when he barely made shore on D-Day. 70 years later, retired Army Command Sergeant Major William Ryan still gets emotional when he recalls the massive D-Day invasion on the beaches of Normandy during World War II.
If I talk about a cemetery and the national anthem it taps, I get emotional. I can feel it right now. When I go to those cemeteries, as often as I've gone there, it gets me. It still gets me. I can feel it right now.
The assault by 7,000 ships and landing craft along a 50-mile stretch of the Normandy coast remains the largest amphibious invasion in history. Ryan's landing craft took a direct hit from a German 88mm artillery piece.
The Germans had a weapon called the 88, the best weapon in the whole army. Accurate. That's what hit my boat, was an 88. And it's a sharp crack, whack, whack, you could hear it. Yeah, all I remember is the boat going up and over. I cracked my skull against the bulkhead. Next thing I remember, I'm laying underneath this rock wall on the left flank of Omaha Beach. 2 men, I was told, dragged me ashore and propped me up.
Still, he waded into the water several times to retrieve the wounded and the dead.
When I was awake, I was going out in the channel retrieving dead bodies and wounded people, you know. And I didn't realize that I kept going unconscious.
For many survivors, that day remains the most important of their long lives. Ryan has returned to Normandy every year since 1994. It never gets any easier.
I can feel it right now. I don't care how tough you are. It gets you. It gets you.
That's why they call them America's greatest generation. The 70th anniversary of D-Day will be observed in a special ceremony at the National D-Day Memorial in Bedford, that's in central Virginia. D-Day veterans will be recognized along with representatives from France, Canada, UK, and Belgium. Up next, we look back at the Pope's historic Holy Land pilgrimage. And 1 week after a deadly shooting in California, how the nation is reacting. On EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick, and it has been 1 week now since that deadly shooting in Santa Barbara left 6 college students dead. It's now being revealed that police officers who visited Elliot Rodger 3 weeks before the shooting knew he posted disturbing videos online, but they did not watch those videos. We're also learning details about the timeline leading up to the killings. Rodger posted his final video stating his reasons for the killings just 10 minutes before he fired the first shots. He also sent an email to his mother, father, and therapist. Rodger's parents issued a statement saying they were, quote, crying out in pain for the victims and their families. Joining us now to talk about this story and more are Terry Jeffrey, editor-in-chief of CNSnews.com, a nonprofit news source, and also Mollie Hemingway from the Federalist. What makes this case so unique?
I think in some ways it's not unique. It's just another story of a senseless killing of a man who was angry, taking out his anger on innocent victims.
Terry?
I think, unfortunately, there are some aspects of it that are not unique. And let me point out one that I think is politically incorrect, but I believe is true. This crazy killer expressed an attitude towards women. Particularly, he adopted this assumption that young women who are unmarried ought to have a promiscuous life. That was an assumption this man took. I would assert that that is an assumption that the liberal establishment in this country accepts. It's actually embedded in the Affordable Care Act regulations issued by the HHS that so many people have sued under. That regulation says that all women of reproductive capacity, which the National Institutes of Health says, I believe, starts at 11 and a half, 12 years old, that the federal government tells us that all women of reproductive capacity should be given free sterilizations, abortifacients, or contraceptives. They especially want, through that regulation, long-acting contraceptives given to young women. I would argue the assumption under that is one that pervades our culture. It degrades women. It degrades human beings. It ought to be fought.
Terry, that ties in with a social media campaign. You wrote about this. You have some issues with that.
Well, the way that a lot of people responded was by taking the words of this madman and considering them to be legitimate points of discussion. And so because he was a misogynist, he hated humanity in general, but women in particular, everyone decided to start talking using this hashtag called #YesAllWomen, which is based on the idea that not all men are rapists and killers, but all women suffer because some men are rapists and killers. And so people started talking about their own grievances, how they'd been victimized, and it soon led into a lot of discussion that was using broad-based generalizations and bigotry to talk about men. I didn't think that was a very helpful response, and it seemed kind of narcissistic, considering that 4 men and 2 women actually died at the hands of this person.
And of course, we saw that hashtag Bring Back Our Girls connected with the Nigerian schoolgirls. Are these social media campaigns effective in any way, or are they just something for people to do?
I think that it's a really easy way to act like you're doing something. It doesn't actually accomplish much. I mean, it might be a little bit less with Bring Back Our Girls, because there actually are some diplomatic solutions that are in play there. But it's a very easy way to sort of signal that you have the right views, but not actually do anything to improve the culture or to treat each other better or to actively work to improve the situation that some people find themselves in.
All right, Mollie, thank you. Terry, we're going to ask you something about this next story, if you'll both stay with us. This week, Pope Francis wrapped up a 3-day visit to the Holy Land, and EWTN News Nightly's Alan Holdren was there with him.
2 walls, 1 story, and a pope with a radical message. Peace. After a whirlwind tour of Jordan, Palestine, and Israel, the question remains, is lasting peace possible? At the wall that separates Israel and Palestine, this gesture against terrorism drew criticism and praise. And at the only wall that remains of the ancient temple, called the Wailing Wall, another powerful act, another flashpoint.
I would imagine and even analyze that the majority are delighted. I think that they're delighted that a man has come and spoken the truth and is now trying to find ways to bring people together to serve as a bridge. But of course not everybody is delighted, and the effects of this visit are going to depend on how closely have we listened, how closely have we interiorized a discourse which is certainly not political.
It's the Holy Land, but it's a land of contradiction. It's a land of conflict. What stuck with people was a powerful gesture, a hug between a Catholic, a Jew, and a Muslim. And that has sparked some hope.
His reactions were really the reaction of the spiritual and the human leader. And that is very important for me as the mayor of Bethlehem. We're not alone.
Well, Pope Francis's pilgrimage made headlines around the world, and I wonder what the highlight was for you guys. I know that the coverage was a little interesting for you, Terry.
Well, right. I sat down this morning and I read through a lot of stories in the establishment press about the Pope's pilgrimage. Then I went to the Vatican website where you can actually read all of his homilies and speeches. And there's 2 different trips there. There was the trip the Pope actually took, and there's the one in the establishment press. In the establishment press, it was all politics. And yes, there was a political element to what happened when the Pope was over there. It's inevitable. He went to Jordan, he went to the Palestinian territories, he went to Israel. But when you read what the Pope actually said, I thought there was extraordinarily newsworthy things that were not emphasized. And there's some themes there that I think actually even go back to this incident in Santa Barbara. Let me tell you what the Pope said in Bethlehem, which of course is the place where Jesus was born. He said, "Today too, children are a sign. They are a sign of hope, a sign of life, but also a diagnostic sign, a marker indicating the health of families, society, and the entire world. Wherever children are accepted, loved, cared for, and protected, and the family is healthy, society is more healthy, and the world is more human." He goes on to say, in Bethlehem, today too, children need to be welcomed and defended from the moment of their conception.
He never misses an opportunity, does he? Now, there were some very poignant moments. I mean, praying at that wall separating Palestine and Israel and referring to Palestine as a state. Do you think this means he is endorsing that idea, Mollie?
I don't know if we can say anything about that. I do think it's very interesting, once again, that the media do try and make this all about political statements, when I think that Pope Francis is most interested in making theological statements and speaking at a higher level. And I also find it interesting that the media, which are so good at picking up on certain political, certain topics that have a political overtone, didn't do a very good job of picking up on the political comments he made about abortion or about marriage or the importance of the family. And it's almost as if they want to push certain messages and hide the other messages that he's giving.
Obviously, in that part of the world, religious freedom is a huge issue. When the Pope was in Amman, Jordan, and he was with King Abdullah, who's doing a good job accepting refugees from Syria, for example, the Pope made a point of saying that religious liberty means people have the right to judge what is the true religion and choose it. And he said when he met with the Grand Mufti in Jerusalem, he said, quote, "May no one abuse the name of God through violence," unquote. That's Pope Francis with the Grand Mufti in Jerusalem.
All right, Terry and Mollie, thank you for joining us. We're going to have you both back. Thank you. And thank you for watching all week. We'll see you again on Monday. We're on 5 days a week now. Until then, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. It's good to leave you tonight on this Friday evening with some of the moving memories from that papal pilgrimage to the Holy Land. Good night and God bless you.